Okay, so thanks first of all to Nigel, David, and Ian for inviting me to talk. So today, then, final year research projects or capstone experience. Can we actually deliver them in troubled times? So, some background first of all. If you look at where our graduates go, and this is sort of data from about 2,500 students from across the UK, then a third are going to stay in scientific and medical research. Another 10% are going to stay in graduate employment in science. The remainder, the remaining 50% plus, are going to alternative careers outside of science. Now, if you look at our traditional final year projects, it's a lab-based project, field work, or a lit review. Now, this isn't really setting up students for this diversity of careers. And therefore, really, what we should be doing is offering a different type of project that sets them up for that, provides work experience, etc., for these different career pathways. Now, this process was changing even before COVID. So colleges are starting to diversify their portfolio of final year projects, but also a changing thinking. So rather than thinking about the narrow research projects we think about in the biosciences, more the US definition, the capstone experience, the cornerstone, the caping stone, etc. So you could think of first year practicals as the cornerstone, the second year mini project as the keystone, and the final year project as the capstone. So a culminating experience in which students are required to integrate and critique and extend knowledge and skills and apply it to a problem which may or may not be research, and critically the opportunity to showcase knowledge and skills not only to ourselves but also to potential employers. So really sort of an output. And also broadening our thinking from a narrow sort of bioscience research definition to a more inquiry-based learning. So really thinking skills and workplace readiness, employability skills, OIR skills, career destinations, etc. But, immediately raises a load of issues. Do students actually want to do these? Is outside staff, what about staff? It's outside of comfort zones, tradition, rigor, accreditation, benchmark statements, learning outcomes, scaffolding, whatever. And then came across COVID. And COVID really has broaden this pace of change, the realization that we couldn't do what we've done previously, and we've got to think differently. So looking at demand, and again, this is from 2,500 students, this is sort of what student first choices would be if they've got, could be offered a portfolio of projects or capstones, and also what they actually got. And you can see that if we take traditional projects, the lab, the teamwork, so lab, fieldwork, bioinformatics, etc., we're virtually matching student choice with actual allocation. Although there's a shift from individual lab-based projects to more team-based lab projects. If we take the other stalwart of the biosciences, the lit review, then there's still demand there, but there's forcing 3 times as many to do these types of projects than actually want to do it. And there's a clear demand there for non-traditional projects, so 3 times as many want to do a non-traditional project than actually want to do it. So are we actually allowed to do it? If you look at the biosciences benchmark statement, then they have to do a project or research-based assignment in the final year. It can be literature, field, or lab work, but it can be outside of the lab. So in education, public understanding, or science, etc. So what about accreditation? So Society of Biology, if you looked at the old accreditation criteria for a standard BSc program, then it wasn't. You had to do a lab-based project, you couldn't do a lit review, etc. This is the new revised criteria that are coming in this September. It's already on their website. So the language has changed. We've now got a graduating level capstone experience, again, integration and applying knowledge, skills, and understanding gained in early years. A shift from what was research-based work to inquiry-based work, and resulting in a defined output. So it gives us flexibility in what they actually create. Some of us are also accredited by the IBMS. And if you look at, well, actually, before we talk about IBMS, so under the new rules, then anything apart from a straight lit review goes. It can be a team-based project, it can be team-based assessments, and the assessments can change. It can, as it says, appropriate assessments. So we don't have to think about the standard scientific paper or dissertation. IBMS, again, quite flexible. So independent research-based project centered on data generation and interpretation. So it can include bioinformatics. They, like the Society of Biology, don't allow a lit review. Now, I contacted them a couple of weeks ago, actually, to get this statement. And some of the project types I'm going to talk about in a minute, they are uncertain at the moment whether it actually comes into that, is allowable under their sort of criteria. They are going to discuss it in a meeting, a committee meeting next week. So again, we'll probably get greater clarity after that. So thinking about this shift, don't think it, to more online capstones. Don't think it is an emergency response. It's things that we can incorporate into our programs to broaden our portfolios and keep them there post-COVID. Likewise, thinking about if we're designing other types of capstone, think about skills and employability. So again, this is data from skills students got in their capstone versus what they're actually using in employment. And so you can see the blue bars, what they got in their capstone, is quite well matched towards the employment once they're using employment. Things to work on that we need to actually engineer into our projects are team working, leadership, which will come if we have more team working, and some of the more business related skills, so commercial awareness, entrepreneurial skills, ethical awareness, etc. The new kid on the block, obviously, is the fourth industrial revolution skills. Now we're moving to sort of a robotics era. We're needing people that can either do things the robots can't do or design new tasks for robots. So there's a list of 10 skills that we now should be engineering into our programs, not only into sort of capstones. The critical ones are complex problem solving, creativity, and emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is persuading people to do things without actually knowing they've been persuaded. So thinking about the different types of capstone that can be offered remotely. So my module has just some background, has between 160 and 210 students on it from 4 programs, so human physiology, pharmacology, neuroscience, and med-sci. And I've got 43 colleagues who help me supervise projects. So in some reverse order, about 30% of our students do a critical review. In our module, it has to be a critical review of the literature, so it fits into hypothesis driven, so it fits into the RSP criteria. They also write a grant proposal as an extension exercise, so a 1-year sort of pilot study to go with it. They don't actually carry out that pilot study. About 50% of our projects are lab-based, so these can be either individual or team-based. Probably about 70% of our lab-based projects are actually team-based projects now. Now, with social distancing, and then going back into the labs and competition for lab space with postgraduate students and postdocs, then they're going to be sort of way down the tree. So one way we can actually do that is flip the concept for our crit review projects. So you could think of an example where they set a research question, come up with a hypothesis, test that out using simulations, and then if the situation allows it, go into the lab to do a proof of concept study, a hands-on proof of concept study. Fieldwork, again, we're a biomed program, we don't have fieldwork projects, but thinking about it, there are lots of publicly available webcams out there. There's also video recordings that we could also use, and we could use these to explore research questions, using animals, humans, or the environment. Bioinformatics projects, so these are data mining things using standard bioinformatics tools. The other alternative is big data, so analyzing large data sets. And there are lots of huge publicly available data sets covering the whole biosciences and beyond. And I shared a website that I created this morning, and the link is there, of these publicly available data sets that we could use as part of projects. Computation modeling, there are both similar models and simulations of all sorts of processes, from the subcellular up to the whole organ or systems level, covering all sorts of disciplines. Some are research quality, some are suitable for educational purposes. And again, we could use those as projects. We could also take it one stage further and think about, say, we want to use for education, getting students to evaluate them as part of their project, which we could also use at a later date. So all of these types of projects are capable of delivering either solely or predominantly online. Now, as well as the more traditional projects, we've been offering non-traditional capstones. We actually have about 14 different types of projects available to students on the module. So some of these here, and again, all of these are capable of being delivered remotely. So systematic reviews, these are prevalent in the health sciences. They're moving into my field of animal experimentation and in education. So what these are a very defined way, systematic way of reviewing literature. So you set up your research question, you set up, which databases you're going to search, what data you're going to extract, etc., before you go anywhere near the literature. And again, these are ideal for team-based projects. Surveys could be done of anything, online. We've had colleagues using Twitter. We've had surveys of animal use in education. Colleague this year did one on DigiHealth apps. Got another colleague who has huge amount of money for antibiotic resistance, who gets the students to do his public engagement work for them. So again, these could all be done remotely. Scientific writing. So this is a website that was actually developed by students, and if I can see if I can pull it up. So this one of the colleagues has a spin-out company that produces antibodies for cardiovascular research, and it's taking its time. Yeah, here we go. So if I pull it across, and again, if we go down the web page, each one of these tabs has a couple of pages of information that the students as a team researched and actually wrote for him. So again, an example of things that they could do. Education and development. So this is where students develop resources for use in the undergraduate curriculum. And again, this is not, I've had them this year redesign a aspirin practical, so excretion of aspirin, and turn that to a predominantly experimental design exercise. This year, we could actually get them to take existing practicals and reform them so they can be delivered online, to cater with the current situation. Science in schools. So this is where we have two carousels that go around primary or secondary schools and deliver interactive science lessons and workshops for the different age groups. So again, in the current scenario, they could design their session, and then if the situation allowed, they could actually go into to deliver it in the school itself. And exactly the same for public engagement. We've had students to develop resources, and a leaflet for a surgery on statin treatment. Another one developed a public engagement resource for a spinal cord injury charity. So again, with both of these, they could develop the resource, and if time allowed or sort of circumstances allowed, deliver it. Yeah, more examples. So professional education. So this is developing resources for use or for training of researchers or the education researchers. So the one in the top corner there was a podcast for training researchers on standardization of PCR responses, etc. could get them to write technical report, or we do get them to write technical reports for small and medium enterprises. So it could be analysis of market share, it could be impact of new legislation, it could be all sorts of things. So providing a research experience, or a research idea, or that the SME couldn't actually do for themselves. Grant proposal, as I said, for our quick review projects, we get them to write a grant proposal extension exercise. We could actually, and have done last year, got students to write the grant proposal along the lines of an MRC grant or a BBSRC grant as their total project, their main output of their project. And finally, one example that we were going to bring in this year, but we're not going to, was for them to devise a healthcare or design a healthcare innovation for a company. And again, this is another one that could be done virtually. So all these different examples can be done either solely or predominantly online. They do cater for those students that want to go into careers outside of science. As I said, not only in sort of normal circumstances, but also in the current COVID situation. And one of these benefits of having this much broader portfolio of capstone experiences, not only sort of current situation, but also moving forward, is that students can really decide what they want to get out of their capstone, then choose the format or type that they would actually like to do to achieve those goals. We'll have to change learning outcomes, and so we have totally changed my learning outcomes to address this, and I will share the slides afterwards. So again, you can see where I'm coming from on this. So that's it. Happy to answer any questions. As I said, I shared some resources this morning around the community. So the first one there, the bio e-practicals, that's about a list of 40 simulations that are available across the biosciences. I've probably got in about another 40 to add to that list. The datasets one is a list of probably about 20 publicly available datasets. If anybody has any more suggestions to add to those lists, please just email me at d.i.lewis@leeds.ac.uk. And finally, capstones workshops. We're all in a situation where we're having to rethink our capstones. If anybody wants me to run a workshop at their institution online, then more than happy to do so. Okay, thanks very much. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. There's some questions coming in via the group and some private questions. So I'll fire off with the first one, which is about the golden nugget from our sector about resistance from staff from these new approaches to capstone projects. Have you faced any, and how do you overcome that?
So actually far less than you would actually think. So, you were part of a survey that I did of colleagues, and staff were actually more supportive than or more willing to take these on board. I think that the key issues are support for them. So helping them, sometimes it's outside their comfort zone. So again, helping them, to do it. And also the other one that initially for me, and it's going to be, for others, is academic equivalence. And so if you can show that these, what the students are creating are equivalent to more traditional projects, then, that's one way forward. And really now that we've got colleagues, if you can start than me saying this is a great example, if I get a colleague who's actually taken one of these and saying, yes, it's much easier to do, etc., then it's sort of, using peer pressure effectively.
Thanks, Dave. There's loads of questions firing now. I think you're going to be in the capstone group later on, Dave, where you may pick up on some of these. So I had a couple via private chat about the team projects you talked about, and how you make sure that students don't get a similar dissertation. And I guess following on from that, with so many different types of projects, how do you ensure marking criteria is consistent across a whole cohort?
Okay, so up until this year, we had two sets of marking criteria. There was one for quick review projects, and there was a separate one for all other types of projects. So it's exactly the same. Ours is assessed by a scientific paper, so you can say intro, methods, results, discussion. It was just different things in it. So say an educational project, instead of the scientific introduction, it would be an educational background. The methods results would be the same because they have to evaluate whatever they do, and the results is putting it in. So the discussion is putting it into the pertinent literature. We've got 43 members of staff who first or second mark these projects. What I do, or as I make sure happens, is that the second marker will be somebody who's not offering this type of project. So somebody who only offers lab-based projects. So again, we're getting conformity across that. And we have a process where if first and second, it's blind double marked, and if the first and second marker differ by 10 marks, then they have to have a discussion. So, and we also pass it by the externals as well. They always get at least one of these to look at. So we put in as many checks and balances as we can to ensure, parity of academic experience and marking.
Thanks, Dave. I think I'll take one final question. I'll combine two from Jenny and Jane into one, which is about the kind of student perspective and the sell of taking a non-lab-based project in terms of their employability, specifically if a student's ultimate ambition post-COVID is to go into a practical lab-based PhD. Would they be disadvantaged by not doing a lab-based capstone project?
Not necessarily. I think they're getting practical experience the rest of their degree program. If you're thinking about all the other skills that you're going to need in a PhD, experimental design, project management, time management, etc., all these different types of projects are generating those. When I do talk about projects to them, I actually study it on, rather than some project types, I study it on skills. These are developing particularly this type of skills. If you're going to this type of career, then this is more beneficial for you. So again, they can make an informed decision based on that. And we never force anybody to do a type of project they don't want to do. Likewise, we don't force them into team-based projects if they don't want to do a team-based project.